Welcome to Artists in Residences, the Westport Library's virtual artist series. I'm Carol Erger-Fass, exhibit curator at the library. In this episode, Miggs Burroughs talks with abstract painter Michael Brenneke. Michael's a lifelong Westport resident and grew up at a time he describes as being when an artist's studio was only a stone's throw in any direction. Inspired by his creative family, he began painting at 12 and was fascinated by seascapes. Eventually, he went on to get a BFA from Tufts University, where he explored figurative art and later experimented with abstraction. Michael's multidisciplinary background includes illustration, woodworking, architecture, and a career in advertising. But his passion for abstract painting has remained the focus of his artistic expression. He usually starts with a line drawing, trying to evade as much conscious control of the process as possible. And after the basic drawing is established, he then adds the elements of color and texture, often trying several combinations before settling on one. And while the compositions are originally conceived to be non-representational, they may still evoke a sense of landscape or figure, challenging the viewer's own sense of the subconscious. Now, let's join Miggs and Michael in his studio.
Thank you, Carol. It's my pleasure to be able to talk to Michael Brenneke today. We have talked before. We've known each other for a while, and Michael's a longtime Westporter, and he knows where all the skeletons are hidden and buried. The bodies are buried in the art world and other worlds. But very prolific artist, a very distinctive technique. And two of your works are right there behind you. And we'll, why don't we just start off with you telling us how long you've been an artist and why would you choose such a ridiculous career?
For the fabulous amounts of money, actually. I came from a family that had a lot of artists in it. My uncle was actually an accomplished wood carver and block printer, but his son, who was my cousin, was a very accomplished artist. He worked for Bill Graham. He made posters. He was the most naturally gifted artist I ever saw. Never went to art school. Not even sure he finished high school, but he was my hero in the family. So I wanted to be an artist early on, and I started painting probably when I was 12. My parents took me to Cape Cod, and I saw these beautiful oceanscapes, which they sell a lot of in the little galleries up there. And then I tripped in that manner across Winslow Homer, and I was just blown away. So I started out trying to do like seascapes and landscapes. And essentially, even though you would mostly call my work now non-objective and abstract, it's really based on that because they're kind of landscapes. They're kind of the sensibility of space and color is landscapes and sometimes still seascapes. So and I get a lot of feedback from people looking at my work saying it looks like rocks. Sometimes they say it looks like maps. All of which is fine. I like creating things. One of the reasons I was drawn to abstract art, I went to art school and I did a lot of life drawing and realistic representational art for a long time. But I always came back to abstract art because I liked the fact that you could kind of see different things in the same painting and that different people would see different things in them. I'll get people looking at my painting and go, well, I see a dog in there. And I'm like, great, that's fine. I didn't paint a dog, but if you do it, that's fine. And I like the fact that it has the ability to kind of be different things to different people and even be different things to me at different times when I look at it. So that's how I got to kind of where I am in terms of the overall style of work. In terms of the process, I was a long time devotee to certain artists. One of them in particular is Paul Klee, very inventive 20th century artist. He was at the Bauhaus, and some of the things he did were he experimented with all kinds of styles and textures. generally worked pretty small. And one of them in particular, I kind of latched onto 40 years ago, which was, if you've ever seen a painting called Twittering Machine in MoMA, it's done with a black line drawing that he filled in with watercolor. And I started doing a lot of work like that over time. Eventually, I wanted to do bigger paintings, and because watercolor is difficult to do, not impossible, but difficult to do in large sizes, I thought, well, what if I did it in oil? So technique-wise, I would create line drawings like this. Can you see that well?
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Bring it a little closer. Yeah. That's...
Okay. This is how I start out. It's like a black line drawing. Sometimes I'll even do them in color if I want to sort of change it up and experiment. And then from there, I begin to color them. It's almost like color by numbers. It's like looking at a Rorschach test. Depending on what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing in it, I may start to color it different ways. Sometimes I will take these basic drawings, photograph them, print them out in black and white, like 8.5 by 11, and experiment with coloring them. For instance, this.
Our guest has left the building. Oh, there he is. Oh, yeah.
What that is it's the same line drawing, printed out, colored 3 different ways.
Tilt it down a little bit so to avoid some reflection. Yeah, that's it. And a little closer. Can you get a little close? Okay, excellent. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's the exact same line drawing, just
the same
as a study.
You know, different color schemes and how the kind of color vibrations work together. Eventually, I chose the one that's basically yellow and made a very large painting, about like a 4x5 painting out of that. Once I had figured out that's the way I wanted to go. The original line drawing was that big. It was 4x5. But again, I photographed it and then printed it out and was experimenting. Because I use the oil paint so thinly, it doesn't really tolerate painting over. It becomes very muddy and dirty very fast. And
Chris, when you do the line drawings, is it one of these things? This is, where the pencil tells you where to go. Is it sort of free form, like what do they call it, unguided drawing, or do you have very
sort of automatic drawing?
Yeah.
Whereas you're not really totally conscious of, I'm going to make it. It's a little free form. Yes, there's a lot of that involved. I'll actually do quite a few of them all at the same time. Prep a lot of these things. I'll do, a dozen or so, and I just sort of get into a rhythm and I change it up as I go. And so there's a little bit of there's not a small amount of accident to it, depending on, how I sort of just move and go with the flow. Some of them never see the light of day because they don't work out so well. But, I'm looking for, hitting that magic, that artistic funny bone.
So I'm curious, now you had a long career in advertising. Did you just sort of put your art on hold, or were you still painting during that time, or did it help you? And were you like a storyboard guy that had to draw all the time, or?
Well, because of my training early on, and because my cousin was such an accomplished cartoonist, and he was the best natural draftsman to this day I've ever seen, without any training at all. He just had the natural gift. So I emulated him, and at an early age, as a young teenager, I was trying to copy him, and I kind of taught me how to draw. So the drawing part, in terms of representational drawing, came naturally to me. I sort of trained myself to do that. But even though even in the abstract, in advertising, abstract art comes into play very little.
Yeah.
Because I had a day job, I would come home at night and paint for an hour. Usually small, because I just I couldn't undertake, big projects. It was just a way of sort of keeping my hand in and continuing the development of that part of my brain. But, I very much enjoyed advertising. I had a very good time, but the two played, apart from the sensibility of space, line, and color as an art director, the two didn't really intersect that much. So.
Yeah, yeah, I can't see your art being used in a Pepsodent ad or anything like that. But so do you actually, to get a sense of the scale, do you want to stand next to your work back there just to get, because I know it's bigger than it looks here.
Yeah, I mean, this one I think is 4 feet by 5 feet. Again, starts with the line drawing, and then I go in and I use very thin oil paint to keep that luminosity you get with watercolor. And then in some areas I build it up. I obviously let it drip somewhat, but I control it. I don't just, it just doesn't turn into a total splatter painting. This one here, both of these are quote unquote not really finished. Sometimes this is more than a year old. Sometimes they just take that long to coagulate and gel. This one, I like a lot of things about it. I still sort of come back and stare at it and go, does it still need something? And obviously I think it does. But this one, for a long time, I did very, let's see. I did very geometric and angular work.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that was a sort of an era of development, and I got more organic, obviously. And again, this is the kind of thing where, you know, you can look at this and, you know, is that a landscape? You know, are there figures in there? And I like that ambiguity.
There's no horizons. I mean, you know, usually in a landscape, you're trying to, you know, you lock into an horizon line and say, okay, now I know that must be the water because it's down below and it's blue, and that's the sky, whatever. But there's no horizon lines in your.
No, I mean, I allude to it. I mean, you can kind of see sort of what might be, but it's a cubist kind of landscape, if it's a landscape at all. But again, the sensibilities of texture and colors are things that are, you know, for the most part found in nature. So to me, it has an organic, you know, it is related to landscape without certainly, you know, palm trees and
right
and waves.
Now, have you given those titles yet? Because you are sort of known for your, let's say, obscure titles.
Do that deliberately because even though I will develop names for certain things, for instance, this is not meant to be a figurative painting, but there is what appears to be kind of an eye in it. And again, this is not finished. And I don't know if you're familiar with, I think it was Star Wars, Gamorrean guards. They were.
Oh yeah. Oh, the Gamorrean guards. Yeah, they have those big, thick faces. Yeah. Heads.
So I see a Gamorrean guard in here.
Yeah, okay.
I refer to it to myself as a Gamorrean guard, but I'm not going to put that on it and put it in a gallery because that's the first thing people will do. They'll look for the Gamorrean guard and they'll see it. So I don't like to lead people. So I will find some way to abstract that title so that I still know what I'm referring to, but it's not obvious. And that's why I do that. That's why a lot of my heroes in abstract art, like Richard Diebenkorn, for instance, and a big one, mainly because he's such a brilliant colorist, and I'm very much about color. Everything's untitled. Untitled number 42.
I know, I hate that personally. I don't like that.
I started to do that for a while, but I got flack from people who remain anonymous about how titles are more interesting.
Well, I mean, it's like if you had quintuplets and you just said kid 1, kid 2, kid 3. I mean, if you went to all the trouble of having a kid, at least give it a name, you know?
Right. Yeah, like Dr. Seuss, thing 1, thing 2.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what they're about.
Now, there's another studio. Where do you do work, and why work in one as opposed to the other, or is it just different kind of, you're in a different headspace when you're in one?
It's part of the staying, you know, active, and I work on several things at any given time. So for instance, these are still, in my opinion, unfinished. They don't have the sort of final, you know, I've got another easel right behind me with yet another smaller piece on it. that I started, and I'm like, where's that going? I'm probably sort of ADD when it comes to working on things, because I keep bouncing around and coming back, and sometimes it takes months and years to decide something's finished. And like I showed you before, the three things I did with the watercolor, this part of my studio is where I do the watercolor stuff. So,
oh wow.
One of the issues, I mean, I love the space up here, but one of the issues is you can see there's a lot of skylights.
Mm-hmm.
They bring in sort of disruptive daylight, and in the end, I paint things in artificial light, because that's how they'll end up being seen. They're going to be lit in the gallery, and therefore, to paint them in daylight, believe me, things change dramatically. Depending on the light they're being hit by. So I paint in the light that'll be used in typical gallery.
Yeah, and gallery, I mean, typically daylight has sort of a bluish, I mean, it doesn't look blue, but
it very much is, because it's bouncing off the blue sky, and it really changes the way things look. That's why, I don't know if you've ever seen that, you can buy actually quote unquote daylight bulbs.
Yeah.
Which I hate, because they are bluish. So these are all like 37 Kelvin, whatever, lighting and halogen lighting.
Yeah, and people in art look better under warm lights, so it's nice. Gallery track lighting. So did you want to go to the other space, or
yeah, I mean,
I'll just see there?
Well, you
just don't.
That's
long. Oh, damn long.
Gift.
Yeah.
This actually painting here, I don't know if you can see it well because it's really not well lit, was my first attempt at the Art of the Northeast show in 1984, and it actually got in, and I was very excited about that. And about 20 years off of not submitting. There's paintings all over the house because Joanne just moves them around. This here on the stairs is one of my personal favorites. Now, again, the name of this is someone looked at it and said, it kind of looks like the Cat in the Hat.
Mm-hmm.
So around here is referred to as Cat in the Hat. It's one of my favorites, but again, I'm not sure I would ever put that name on it in any sort of show, because these, by the way, are Lucia White's.
Lucia White, yeah, great photographer.
This was actually her brother's house, and she lived in the stone studio on the hill. All right, so all right, so this is the other studio I work in the basement, and two reasons why I like to work down here sometimes. Number one, I have a lot of things going on at any given time. So, there's yet another painting on the easel down here I've been working on. Also, there is no daylight down here. And so I totally control the light to work in. Not to mention there's a wood stove right there that keeps me very toasty in
nice.
cold winter months. So that's really... the reason this exists down here is just more space to work and, different, projects that are, yet to be realized. This is actually another watercolor. I haven't been doing that many watercolors lately. I work so much in oil these days.
Can you bring it up really close? Because it's let me get a sense of the actual texture and paper and all that, because there's a lot going on there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nice. So would that be a finished piece, or that's a sketch for a bigger painting?
No, that would be a unique piece. That's not a sketch for a bigger painting. That line drawing was done directly onto watercolor paper, and then again, it's kind of like paint by numbers, whatever numbers are floating around in my head, and just that's how it came to be. So that would be a unique piece of its own.
talked about, and I find it kind of refreshing that you're not, so precious about your work, and we talked about that a little bit, that you will sometimes take a portion of a painting, and why don't you explain it?
Very much so. I mean, there's these flat files are full of near misses, and some of them not even so near misses. But you look at a painting. Let's say I decided I really couldn't stand this thing. What I'll do is I'll kind of go, yeah, but this here, if once you edit out, because one of my personal downfalls is I sometimes put too much, or try to put too much into a painting, and it becomes overburdened. It just becomes too heavy, too busy. But there are beautiful things within it, and it's just a matter of kind of editing it down and finding, the gem in the big rock. And so I'll do that. This is just one template. It could be a different size. Actually, the iPhone's very handy. If I took a picture of this, you can do exactly what I just did and in the edit mode of the iPhone photo, and just try things out, and then print them out and save them, and stare at them later, and I might get 5 different things out of this and decide, well, this one's really good, and I'm gonna go with that. So it took me many years to get to the point where I was willing to cut things down. Again, that preciousness that I made it. I don't want to kill it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sucks, but I don't want to kill it.
But it's mine. Yeah. So, wow. So how many pieces do you think you're working on simultaneously? I mean, from sketch stage to finished, and upstairs, downstairs. I mean, is there in progress, how many pieces? A half a dozen?
Pieces obviously kind of dominate because they're hard to kind of put away and forget about. So this again is probably months and months old, and I've just kind of been looking at it. I've played a little bit of it with Photoshop and said, what if I made this area bright red, or I play with it, because again, once you commit to the oil, it begins. If you miss and you keep trying to paint over it, gets muddy, and mud is the enemy of light. So lots of little losers. I'll pull out and just kind of, like this one. It's it's kind of heavy. It doesn't really do it for me. I might just go through the door sometimes, pull something out and go, what if I just put, hot red lines through this, and then sort of go back and revisit it and try to make it better. That was something I never did in the past. I would sit down, I would do a painting, and if it worked, great. If it didn't, I was done with it. However, I never threw anything out. So I can go back a long way to find these things that were kind of not successful. And I guess in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I know what I'm doing, I should be able to fix things. Mm-hmm. If I really have a sensibility about what succeeds and what doesn't, at least on my terms, my criteria, I should be able to do that, right? I should be able. So I've kind of become challenged by that to go, if I have any sense of aesthetics and what I'm aiming at, I should be able to figure out what I was going for and go at it again.
Right, but I think there's one thing, and I've heard musicians talk about this, or people talk about music as with art. That you're every day we're sort of a different person. I mean, we wake up in a different headspace. You're grumpy, you're happy, you're optimistic, you're pessimistic, you're this, that, the other thing. Things happen in your life, and the piece of artwork that maybe you were pleased with yesterday doesn't the next day not so much, or vice versa. So do you find that you approach a piece and go, you know what, I used to hate this, now I love it, or?
Well, yes, presumably I thought it was a good idea when I did it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah, I'll frequently go back and go, no, I'm kidding myself. This doesn't really work. At least by today's, this Thursday's standard, it doesn't fly. So absolutely. That's why I have so many kind of what I call, near misses and failed attempts that I might come back to, literally years later and go, there was something to this and I didn't quite get it, but maybe I can get it there now.
How about, do you ever enlist the help? I know you have your lovely partner, Joanne. Is your studio's off limits to her? Any other kind of outside influence? Do you ever ask for, hey, what do you think of this one? Or what do you think of that one? Or is it better not to hear any outside?
No, I never ask, but I'm always told. Okay. No, she's actually very good that way.
Yeah.
Second pair of eyes that, doesn't have all the baggage that's inside my brain. To what, and she's had very good ideas for, she had the idea to take some of these larger paintings and cut them into narrow strips, which in some cases worked really well.
Do you have that sample of that one? There's one that was, I think, in the library exhibit, which you had a year or two ago. It was that long, very narrow vertical. If it's in the other one, don't worry about it.
Well, there was one I showed you up in the upper studio that there were two strips I cut off a much bigger painting and made it a better painting and subsequently sold that painting. But the strip itself, I created another piece out of. However, the thing you're talking about was a single, just as an example, was a single piece of art that we cut into 3 strips and framed them separately. So they pulled them apart and they became a triptych. And that actually made it a lot more interesting. Again, that was her idea. And that's the kind of thing that she can contribute to the process that I wouldn't have gotten there. It's just a different perspective, and sometimes she likes things that I don't like so much, and vice versa. But that's part of making art anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
Everybody's going to be clapping for what we think is good.
And how we have to ask this because it's so pervasive. I mean, is the whole COVID pandemic thing informed your work, in your current work, in any way? Do you find that as just kind of the shadow looming over you all the time, or you can dismiss it and just work like, do what you do?
I mean, my work, I couldn't ever, because the way I work, which is sort of instinctually and it's based on landscape. It's not really topical. It's not really informed by world events, at least in the way my brain
one thing, even color choices. I mean, you might say, I don't feel like using bright turquoise and oranges today. I'm just going to use grays and blacks and browns and I find that I'm really not affected artistically. I'm certainly affected in many other ways by what's going on, but I find that it doesn't really I don't think seep in. If it does, it's totally subconscious, because I kind of continue to do what I do. I'm not like Rothko, where the paintings are getting blacker and blacker. But no, I wouldn't. Not consciously, certainly. I continue to do what what I do. And we're, I mean, we're all struggling with this, but where do you exhibit? Are you in virtual? Do you apply or look for any opportunity to exhibit, like in a virtual website?
I have these websites that inform me that there's a call for work in Arkansas, and generally speaking, I don't participate in those yet. I know a lot of our colleagues do. Some of them do quite well that way. I have a website. It's just michaelbrenneke.com, where I put up the things that I obviously think are the more successful pieces. But I don't go on to, I don't know, I think Saatchi has a website. There's any number of websites where you can actually put your art up for sale. I haven't done that yet. That may not be, the smartest thing about my artistic career, but I guess I will get there sometime. I just haven't yet. But again, I have my own website, and people who just Google my name, that I believe that website usually comes up because it's my name. But probably a good idea to do that, because I know, many of our cohorts at the collective do it.
Yeah, and we're looking into this virtual gallery thing where it's more immersive, where you look, you're in a digital space, but you can move around with your mouse, and it's
That
not
was
just,
very interesting. And like I said, I was muted last night and couldn't unmute.
yeah.
What I wanted to say is, can you make the virtual space look like the Whitney?
Yeah, well, there are templates, I guess. Yeah, you could actually, if you photograph a particular space, they could, what do they call it? Not patching, but blend together and create, like the Playhouse Barn, or the Whitney. You could do that. Yeah, I mean, ultimately,
the Guggenheim or MoMA. It's like
yeah, and you could do it. You have a one-person show and do your own work there, and say, look, I'm in the Guggenheim, and I'm sure that's doable. But well, thanks. Anything else that we haven't seen that we don't want to overlook here before we say goodbye?
Not really. I'll probably think of something in a minute as soon as we end this. But right now, I feel like I've
Well, no, it's been
much as more than I normally do. So
yeah. Well, thank you for giving us the time and. Well, thanks so much, Michael. And
I'm sorry I didn't get my sequined leotard back from the dry cleaners in time, because I did want to wear that, but next time.
Okay, promise. Yeah, no, because we
that put a bad image in your head, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It was a joke.
All right. Take care. Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thanks, Michael, for sharing both of your spaces with us today. I didn't realize when I said we were visiting the studios there would actually be two. Very cool to see how you work. To see more of our Artist in Residences series, check out the library's YouTube page, Westport Pub Lib, and search for Artist in Residences. Thanks, and hope to see you at the library again soon.